Hi and welcome to this DCP web tutorial. In today's tutorial I'm going to show you how to create this photo zoom effect using Adobe After Effects. Okay, so the first thing we need to do is download a few pictures. So let's go to Unsplash and download this picture. It's this background here. We'll click the download button. I'll put links to these images in the YouTube description. We'll click download and download this picture as well. So we've got these two pictures. Let's just open up this folder and we'll drag and drop these two pictures into here so we can see them in this folder. We can close down the web browser and then we'll go ahead and open up Adobe After Effects. Okay, so the first thing we need to do is click on new composition, and inside here we'll set it to 1920 by 1080 and we leave it at 30 frames a second, and we're going to set the duration to 5 seconds and then click OK. And we have a blank canvas now, and we need to get this folder open on our computer on the overlay, so it needs to be on top, and we can drag and drop the picture of the woman into the timeline, and that will create a timeline or add her to the timeline, right? Now you can see if we use the mouse wheel, the image is quite large, so let's left click on this handle, let's drag it inwards, but it's going to drag and squash the image. So hold down the shift key and that will scale in perspective. So we'll scale down the image and we'll just drag it to around here, and what we want to do is middle mouse click and then zoom in towards the bottom of this arm here, roughly around this sort of position here. And we can use the pen tool now, so let's click on the pen tool. This is the pen tool here, so you can use shortcut G or click on pen tool, and we want to click here and then start to mark around this picture. Let's just undo that. Really, we should start from right underneath, will be better. So let's just draw around this picture or mark around it with these vertices. We need to go around the whole picture, and it's worth probably putting a bit of time into this. I'm going to do it pretty quick, but the more time you put, the better the cutout of this image will be. But I'm going to do this pretty quick because I'm sure you don't want to watch me sitting here clicking around pictures. Sometimes you need to zoom in a little bit to get more of a accurate point. Use your mouse wheel to zoom in and out of the image, and you can click on these little handles and reposition them if they're not quite right, but this should be pretty good for what we want to demonstrate. So normally I'll take a bit more time, add a lot more vertices to get more accuracy, but I'm sure this will be fine. When you drag in here, when you drag a different vertex, make sure you click on the last one. So click on this one here at the very end, and you can continue to draw the next one. That's just a little tip for you. Just remember to click on the last one. That's it. You can just continue to go around this picture. So you can actually do something very similar to this using Blender. I might do another tutorial doing something similar to this using Blender and GIMP. So we would typically use GIMP to cut around the picture first, and then we can move that into Blender as a transparent PNG. But today I want to use After Effects. I haven't really done many tutorials on After Effects, so I thought let's do something a bit different today. And After Effects is very powerful. You know, Blender is great for what it does, 3D animation and stuff, but After Effects is also very powerful as well. So we'll click down here, and then we can click over here to close it. When we close it, you can see the cutout now, right? So let's save our work. This is a good time to save it. Let's go to File, Save As, and on my desktop I've got this folder here. So let's just call this Zoom Effect -01. Let's spell that correctly. Zoom Effect -01, and let's save this. Okay, so the next thing we want to do is get that background picture in here. So let's middle mouse click so we can see the full canvas here in the screen, and then we'll open up the folder again, but this time we're going to drag this picture over to here, and that will add it into this collection here, and then we can drag that picture to the timeline and drag it a layer below. We want it to be a layer below, so we'll drag it into the timeline a layer below and just reposition it so it snaps to the end correctly. Yeah, just want to make sure that it's here, set here correctly. Now you can see the lady being cut out and the overlay on top, and the cutout was pretty good, right? If you think about it, we didn't spend that long doing it. You can click on the picture. Let's just get rid of this. You want to when you're not using that tool, that pen tool, you want to click on the selection tool, right? So when you click on this top layer, you can just zoom back in here and adjust the points just to get it a bit more clean if you want to, but I think this is pretty good. So let's click on this background layer, and we want to resize it a little bit. So just like before, we'll click on the background layer here, the bottom layer. Let's click on this left handle and drag inwards, but we want to leave a gap around the edge, around this sort of gap around the edge. We don't want to go all the way. And what we want to do is we want to resize this, but we want to animate that resize, right? So let's click here on this layer, this one here, the second layer, and press the letter S. The letter S will allow us to bring up the scale tool, and we're going to click on this little icon here. It's like a little, it actually adds a keyframe. When we click on it, it will turn blue, and that adds a keyframe. So you can see a keyframe here, a little blue dot. We need to go all the way to the end, and then we just can zoom. So we can left click in this bottom or the top, any of the corners really. We can left click, drag in, and hold down the shift key just to drag it in and try and get the frame. Don't overdo it so you see black on the sides. You want to make sure that you still see a little bit of picture on the side here. Something around here should be good. So when you move the timeline, you'll see the picture will zoom in and out like this. And that's kind of the effect that we want for the background. We want it to be zooming in and out like this. Okay, so the next thing we want to do is really reposition this top layer. So let's click on the top layer, and we can just drag the person towards the center. We want her to be towards the center of the image. So let's just left click and see where that's positioned. And that's pretty good, roughly around the center here. And then we want to add an effect to this layer as well. Okay, so let's click on this top layer, the very top one. Let's go all the way back to the beginning of the timeline. Click on this top layer, and then we'll add 3D option here. So tick this off, this little box here, this one right here, and then right click on the canvas down here in the blank space here, this blank space here, and then go to new, and we want to add a camera, and then just go ahead and click OK. And we're going to expand these camera options and expand the transform, and in the position, this position option add a keyframe. Here we'll add a keyframe, so you see a little blue dot there, that's a keyframe. Let's go all the way to the end here, and then we can just change the position of the camera. So we can either zoom it in, zoom it out. Really want to zoom in like this, and then you can change like the pitch as well here as well. You can change that slightly, and we can change the perspective here as well. So we can almost twist this person slightly in the movement like this. So now we've got these two effects working in sort of sequence like this. So I want to add a few other effects in here. I want to show you how that's done. So let's try that. Okay, so let's just minimize this layer. So this layer with the camera, let's minimize it. And then let's click on this very bottom layer. We can also minimize that one as well. So it's just like 3 layers stacked like this. Let's click on the background layer. Go to layer here, go to new, and go to adjustment layer. So we'll have this new adjustment layer sitting in between the woman and the background. So we've got an adjustment layer here that sits in the middle. We're going to right click on that adjustment layer, go to effects, go to let's see, generate, and then we want to do lens flare. So now we've got a lens flare here, and we want to animate that lens flare. So let's expand the adjustment layer, then expand the effects, and expand the lens flare. And we want to go to the first frame, go to the very first frame, and for the flare center, we want to put in a keyframe. Let's add a keyframe, and then let's go to the very last frame and work out where we want the lens flare to end. So we can adjust it by moving these handles here. So we can move it up and down. I kind of want it to be towards the bottom here, and then more towards the left hand side. So around sort of here, I think a little bit further down. And then we can go back to the first frame and we can see that movement now. So we can decide whether we want that to move this way or we want to bring it up a little bit. So we can go to the first frame and adjust the lens flare. So let's have it above a little bit and let's bring it more towards the center like this. Roughly around here, I think, around here, just above this mountain here. So now we can see what happens with this lens flare. So we can easily animate the lens flare. We've got quite a few different layers here, all animated in sequence. I want to add another light source to this as well. So I want to show you how to use lighting in After Effects as well. So we can add some lighting to this. This lady maybe will change some lighting based on this lens flare movement as well. So let's go to File, Save. Okay, so let's minimize this layer. And let's click on the layer with the picture of this lady here, right? So it's the second layer here. This one. We'll click on that layer, go to, let's go to Layer here, New. And we're going to add a light source, light. And for now, we're going to set the light quite high, roughly around, let's say around 200, 210. And we'll hit the Enter key, and then we'll get this light source added. And we can actually animate this light source. So we can decide roughly where we want to position it in terms of where this light is pointing, right? So you can click on this little dot here, and we want the light to be pointing towards the head, towards the top. And you can middle mouse click inside this center circle. You can move it on the arrows. Let's just undo that. You can click here and click on the green arrow and move the object. You can move it around, but you can also click on the center point. It's a little tricky to click, but then you can move the lighting. It's illuminating this particular object, right? So our lens flare kind of starts up here, and I want the light to sort of move with the lens flare, kind of like this, right, across the person. So let's start it up here somewhere. And what we'll do is go to the first keyframe, so around here, and you can see our lens flare is pretty much up here somewhere, so that the light will be pointing from this direction. And let's open up the spotlight and then the transform, and we want to put a keyframe for the position here, keyframe, and then let's go all the way to the end, and we'll click on the middle here. You have to be a little bit tricky, a little bit careful. Click on the middle, and then we drag it down towards here like this. Now we can see the lighting like this. So I think that's pretty cool. Imagine we've done this with still images. We haven't really, done any video footage. It's all done with still images. So let's try and export this now to see what the end result looks like. Okay, so the first thing we should do is save our work. So let's go to File, Save, then go to File. And in fact, let's go to File. Make sure you're on the first keyframe as well here. Drag it across. Let's go to File, Export. In fact, we want to export and then add to render queue here. So when we do that, we'll see it in the render queue. This gets a little bit tricky and confusing sometimes, but it's very simple. We need to decide what sort of quality we want, and we're just going to leave it at lossless. Best settings, let's give it the full whack and get the best quality out as possible. You can adjust these settings and the video quality won't be as good, but let's leave it as default settings. And in here in the output, you need to click here and you need to decide where you want that to be saved. So it's on my desktop, it's in this folder on my desktop, and we'll call this Zoom Effect -01, like what the file is called. We'll call the AVI file that as well. Let's click save, and now all we need to do is click render. So it renders out pretty fast, you can see. It takes a little bit of time, but it's only 5-second duration. And you hear that nice little sound, that tells you it's all done. So let's just go to File, Save, and we can minimize this. Then on my desktop, we've got the folder. So we've got this folder, and inside of this folder, we'll have this new AVI file. Where is it? Zoom Effect. Let's open it, and we'll leave it on repeat for a second, and then we can see that effect working. So you can use different images. You could take a photograph of yourself and look how easy it was to cut around. So as long as you can cut around the photo quite quickly, you can choose different backgrounds. You can do a lot of things in this software in terms of this type of effect. You don't have to have the lens flare, but I think the lighting was quite a cool idea to have that lighting, the sort of lighting effect that we did from the top here following in the lens flare, right? So then you can see the person being illuminated by that lens flare or that lighting. So I think it's a pretty cool effect, very easy to do, and I've done other ones like this, spent a lot more time on them as well, but I wanted to show you how you can use After Effects quite quickly. After Effects can be a little bit tricky to get a grasp of and understand, but once you get the basics down, then you can do some pretty cool stuff. So I'll be doing some more tutorials on After Effects, but I wanted to start off with something pretty easy, not too complicated, and yeah, this is kind of the end result. I'm going to try and do something similar to this using Blender. We probably won't be able to do the lens flare, but we can use some other effects in Blender. We can use, volumetric lighting or something like this, and maybe do something pretty cool using Blender as well. It'll be interesting to try and do something like this, because in Blender normally I'm doing 3D stuff. Hardly ever do anything, well, never really done anything 2D, but I'm pretty sure we can achieve something similar kind of in Blender, so we'll try and do that as well. So let's minimize this. Let's close this and close this folder. That's the end of this tutorial. I hope you find it useful, and I look forward to seeing you in the next DCP Word tutorial.